Hello, I'm Peter. I'm so glad you could join me for tonight's journey. Hello, I'm Peter Miller. I'm so glad you could join me for tonight's journey. But here is a hard truth you need to hear. You probably wouldn't last a single night in the world I'm about to describe. Not because you lack courage, but because we have forgotten the brutal, intimate language of the cold. We live in an era of clicks and beeps, the steady hum of a furnace, the effortless slide of a thermostat. In the process, we've lost a crucial winter survival skill once passed quietly from one generation to the next. Tonight, we go back to the early 1800s when winter wasn't just a season. It was an adversary that crept into walls and froze the very breath in your lungs. Survival depended on small, deliberate choices: how you slept, how you shared warmth, how you endured the long, dark nights. Before we test your will against the frost, take a moment to like and subscribe. And let me know, are you joining me from a drafty attic in London or a humid evening in Singapore? Now, adjust your pillow. Pull your blanket a little tight. There is a phenomenon that happens only in deep winter, something architects call the snow silence. As the drifts outside pile higher against the castle walls, reaching 5 or 6 feet deep, they act as a massive sound absorber. The snow swallows the noise of the world. It muffles the hooves of horses in the stables, the footsteps of the guard, even the groan of the wind itself. The castle is no longer just stone. It is wrapped in a blanket of white cotton. The silence tonight is not empty. It is heavy, full, and deeply protective. You sit on the edge of the bed, shivering slightly. The frame creaks under your weight. The mattress beneath you rustles straw and feathers, shifting inside their linen casing. You can feel the dampness in the air now. It is a wet cold typical of England and France in winter. Not the dry, brittle cold of the mountains, but something heavier, something that settles into your lungs and joints and stays there. The physics are simple and cruel. The stone walls absorb moisture from the rain and snow outside. That moisture travels slowly through the rock, seeping inward, and then evaporates into your room as the interior air warms slightly from the fire. The result is a chamber that is both cold and humid, the worst possible combination. Historians often describe medieval castles not just as cold, but as weeping. When the fire raises the temperature even slightly, condensation forms on the inner surface of the walls and runs down in slow rivulets like tears. You can see it now if you look closely. The stone glistens in the firelight. Here and there, tiny droplets gather and fall, hitting the rushes on the floor with a soft, irregular patter. Drip, drip, drip. It is the sound of the castle crying, mourning its own coldness. You look down at the floor. It is stone like everything else in the castle. Flagstones fitted together, worn smooth by centuries of feet. Cold, unforgiving. To walk on bare stone in winter would be agony. The cold would travel up through your feet, into your legs, and into your core. But the stone is not bare. It cannot be. Instead, the floor is covered with rushes. Dried grasses and reeds gathered from riverbanks in the summer and fall bundled and stored until winter. Now they are strewn across the floor in thick layers, sometimes 6 inches deep. They crunch and rustle when you walk on them. Historians describe rushes as one of the most universal features of medieval life. Rich and poor alike covered their floors with them. They were cheap, abundant, easy to replace. But they served multiple purposes. Insulation? Yes. They created a barrier between your feet and the frozen stone. But they also absorbed spills, muffled sound, and provided a place for scraps of food to fall. In the great hall below, rushes were changed frequently, but here in the bedchambers they might be changed less often, monthly, or even just a few times a winter. They would grow dank and musty, compressed by feet into a matted carpet. There is a famous complaint from Erasmus, the Dutch scholar, who visited England later in this period. He wrote with disgust about the rushes, describing them as repositories of filth. But he also noted a quirky custom, the sprinkling of herbs among the rushes: lavender, rosemary, meadowsweet, pennyroyal. The herbs release their scent when crushed underfoot, masking the mustiness of the rotting rushes below. And some herbs like pennyroyal were believed to repel fleas. You slide your feet off the bed for a moment, testing the floor. The rushes compress beneath your weight, dry on top, damp below. A sharp scent of lavender rises, mixing with the earthy smell of decay. It is not unpleasant exactly. It is simply medieval. The smell of a world where humans live intimately with nature. You realize this as an ecosystem, a miniature world. Mice nest in these rushes. Beetles hunt among the stems. But without this layer of grass, the castle would feel even more like a prison of stone. Even colder, even harder. You pull your feet back up onto the bed. The wind rattles the wooden shutters. There is a curious irony here, one that travelers to medieval England often noted with surprise. Sometimes the peasants in their wattle and daub huts were warmer than the lords in their castles. A small wooden hut with a thatched roof and a single room traps heat efficiently. The low ceiling keeps the warmth from the hearth close to the inhabitants. The family sleeps together sometimes with their animals, and the combined body heat raises the temperature to something almost comfortable. But a lord in his castle. He sleeps in a vast stone chamber with 20-foot ceilings. All the heat from his fire rises straight up into useless space. The stone walls radiate cold. The floor is ice. He has wealth. He has power. But he does not have warmth. Not in the way the peasant does. One account from a visiting Italian merchant in the 1390s expresses shock at this. He had expected the English nobility to live in comfort. Instead, he found them shivering in their great halls, wrapped in furs, while the common people in their cramped cottages seemed far more at ease. Grandeur, he wrote, comes with a price, and that price is paid in cold. You realize this truth now sitting on your bed in this enormous chamber. The room is a symbol of status. The high ceiling, the carved posts, the tapestries, all of it announces wealth and power, but it does not keep you warm. Status cannot defeat physics. Stone is stone. Cold is cold. The wind rattles the wooden shutters. Clack, clack, clack. A reminder that the only thing separating you from the howling gale outside is a plank of oak and an iron latch. You stand and walk to the window. The shutters are closed, barred from the inside with a heavy wooden beam. But you can feel the draft seeping through the cracks between the planks. It flows across your face like cold water. Some castles, you know, had oiled cloth or thin sheets of horn stretched across the windows to let in light while blocking the wind. Translucent, not transparent. The world outside would appear as vague shapes and colors, like looking through fog. But this chamber has no such luxury, just wood. And wood is full of cracks. You press your palm against the shutter. It is cold to the touch, cold enough that your skin almost sticks to it. You pull your hand back quickly and rub your fingers together trying to restore feeling. And consider this, the storm outside is not just a threat, it is a shield. In the 14th century, winter was the only true season of peace. Deep snow meant that armies could not march, raiders could not ride. The freezing mud stopped the wheels of politics and war. When you hear the wind howling, it is actually the sound of safety. It means no one is coming. The world has stopped. For tonight, the castle is not a fortress of war, but a capsule of peace suspended in the white void. Your senses take over now. The smell of damp wool from your cloak, the smell of old stone musty and mineral, the smell of the dying fire sharp with wood smoke, and a faint tang of resin from the pine logs. It is the scent of winter survival, a mixture of everything humans use to keep the cold at bay. Fabric, fire, stone, flesh. Consider the floor beneath your feet again. We spoke of the rushes, but there is more. In the wealthiest chambers beneath the rushes, you might find a layer of woven reed mats or even heavy woolen carpets imported from the East. These were not just for decoration. They were thermal breaks, a way to interrupt the conduction of cold from the stone into your body. Every layer mattered. Every inch of distance from the frozen rock was a victory. And what of the windows? We mentioned the shutters, but did you know that some castles had window seats built into the thick stone walls? These alcoves lined with wood and cushions allowed you to sit near the light during the day while being protected from the direct draft. At night, heavy wooden shutters would be barred and thick curtains drawn across the entire alcove, creating a double barrier against the wind. You turn back to the bed. It is time to begin the ritual. Time to build your fortress within the fortress. Because you cannot change the stone. You cannot change the wind. You cannot change the winter. But you can change yourself. You can wrap yourself in layers. You can create a small, warm world inside this cold one. A cocoon, a nest, a place where sleep is possible. And that, in the end, is all anyone can ask for. In your dreams, you become aware of the walls around you, not just as barriers, but as living things, breathing, weeping, holding the cold at bay. But even in sleep, part of your mind remains active, observing, understanding. The walls of your chamber are not bare stone. They cannot be. Bare stone would radiate cold so intensely that sleep would be impossible. Instead, the walls are dressed, covered, hidden beneath layers of fabric that soften their cruelty. Tapestries hang from iron hooks driven into the mortar between stones. Massive pieces of woven wool, some as large as the wall itself, depicting scenes of hunts and battles and biblical stories. These tapestries are not just decoration, though they serve that purpose. They are insulation, a barrier between your body and the frozen rock. The principle is simple. The tapestry creates a pocket of air between itself and the wall. Air is an excellent insulator, far better than stone. And the thick wool of the tapestry itself adds another layer of protection. When the cold tries to radiate inward from the stone, it must pass through the air gap, then through the wool. By the time it reaches the interior of the room, its force is diminished. Not eliminated, never eliminated, but diminished enough to matter. Historians debate how effective this really was. Some argue that tapestries made a significant difference, raising the interior temperature by several degrees. They point to household accounts that show noble families traveling with their tapestries, hanging them in whatever castle they stayed in, as if the fabric were as essential as their beds. Other scholars are more skeptical. They point out that tapestries could not stop the draft. They could not seal the cracks around windows or doors. And the stone walls were so massive, so thermally conductive, that a few inches of wool could only do so much. The truth, as always, is probably somewhere in the middle. Tapestries helped, but they were not a solution. They were a mitigation, one tool among many in the constant battle against the cold. In your dream state, you see the tapestries clearly, though you know the room is dark. You see the woven figures frozen in their eternal hunt, a stag leaping, a hound pursuing, a nobleman with his bow drawn. The colours are rich, deep reds, blues, golds, but they are muted by smoke and age. The wool has absorbed years of wood smoke, and the colours have darkened, becoming earthier and more subdued. You reach out in your dream and touch one of the tapestries. The wool is rough under your fingers, dense. You can feel the individual threads thick as twine. The weaving is tight, barely any space between the fibres. This is quality. This is craftsmanship. This is wealth made tangible. But it is also strategy. Every thread is a small barrier against the cold. Every inch of coverage is a small victory. Some chambers, you know, have wooden panelling as well as tapestries. Oak boards fitted together and mounted on the walls, creating an even larger air gap. The panelling is carved with scrollwork and religious symbols, beautiful to look at. But its true purpose is thermal. Wood is a poor conductor of heat, far better than stone. A wooden wall radiates far less cold than a stone one, and the air gap between the panelling and the stone adds even more insulation. Nobles who could afford such panelling often had it installed in their sleeping chambers, their solas, the private rooms, where they spent the most time in winter. The difference was noticeable, measurable, real. Yet, even with tapestries and panelling, the cold still found ways in. Through cracks in the mortar, through gaps around the window frames, through the very pores of the stone where moisture seeped inward and evaporated, cooling the air. The battle was never won, only fought, every night, every winter. In your dream, you see the condensation forming on the stone behind the tapestries, clear droplets gathering where the warm interior air meets the frozen rock. The droplets run down slowly, soaking into the bottom edge of the tapestry, leaving dark stains on the wool. The tapestries themselves suffer from this constant moisture. They grow heavy. They rot at the bottom. They must be taken down periodically, aired out, cleaned and repaired. It is a constant cycle of maintenance. Nothing in a medieval castle stays perfect. Everything requires attention, vigilance, labor, but the effort is worth it. Because without the tapestries, without the panelling, the chamber would be uninhabitable. The cold would win absolutely. With them, you have a chance, a fighting chance. Your dreaming mind accepts this, understands it, even appreciates it. The castle is not your enemy. It is trying to protect you. The walls keep out the wind, the snow, the wolves. They keep out invaders. They just cannot keep out the cold. Not completely, but they try, and the tapestries help them try. And together, stone and wool and air and human ingenuity create a space where sleep is possible. Not easy, not comfortable, but possible. And that is enough. Evil documentary on winter survival skills, where the lens focuses on the intimacy of survival. There is no personal space here. To survive, you must surrender the concept of mine and accept ours. As you settle, you can feel the physical reality of the man next to you, the hard ridge of his hip bone, the subtle expansion of his ribs as he breathes. It is an uncomfortable intimacy, yet it is the only thing keeping you alive. The air inside the tent is thick. It doesn't smell good, let's be honest about that. It smells of unwashed bodies of feet wrapped in damp cloth of stale wine and old leather. But strangely, that smell becomes comforting. It is the scent of the herd. It is the scent of life in a landscape that smells only of ice and stone. And then there are the invisible enemies. As your body warms slightly, the lice in the seams of your clothing wake up. You feel them crawling, a phantom itching that starts at your collar and moves down your spine. In a modern bed, this would be a nightmare. Here it is, just a fact of existence. You don't scratch because moving lets cold air in. You just accept the sensation, integrating the itch into the background noise of the night. Someone, maybe the scarred man, starts to hum. It's barely a sound, just a low vibration in his throat, a fragment of a prayer melody or a tavern song slowed down to a dirge. He's not singing to entertain, he's singing to self-soothe. The sound vibrates through the floor, through the pressed bodies. It's a sonic form of warmth, a reminder that minds are still active, still human inside these frozen shells. It feels incredibly fragile, this little hum, against the howling wind outside, like a candle flame made of sound. The boy is shivering already. You can feel it through the press of bodies. He hasn't learned yet how to conserve energy, how to stay still and let the collective warmth build. You shift closer, letting your shoulder press against his back. The contact helps. His shivering slows slightly. Outside, the night sounds of the camp continue. Voices calling passwords to sentries. The crunch of boots on frozen ground. A dog barking somewhere, then stopping abruptly. The wind has picked up steady and cold, flowing over the tent like water over a stone. You can hear it whistling through the gap at the tent's entrance. Feel the draft it creates. This is the problem in its purest form. 6 human bodies trying to maintain enough warmth to survive until dawn. The cold is patient. It doesn't rush. It just presses in from all sides, finding every gap in your defenses, every thin spot in the wool, every place where skin is exposed. And it waits to see who will make the first mistake, who will fall asleep too deeply, whose body will give up the fight. But you have something the cold doesn't. You have knowledge. You have the techniques passed down from veterans who survived winters before you. You have each other. And you have the stubborn human refusal to surrender the small defiant spark that says not tonight. I will not die tonight. The work of sleep is about to begin. The tent is not a building. It's barely even a shelter in the way we understand the word. What it is, fundamentally, is a membrane between you and the sky. A single layer of woven linen canvas, maybe the thickness of your thumb when you pinch it. The fabric was treated with something, probably beeswax or tallow, to give it some water resistance. But that treatment has worn thin over years of use. You can see it in how the canvas sags, how certain spots look darker than others, where moisture has soaked through repeatedly. The design is ancient. 2 rectangles of canvas lashed together at the top and stretched over a horizontal pole. The pole itself is just a straight length of wood, maybe ash or oak, worn smooth from being gripped and carried and set up hundreds of times. The ends rest on 2 upright stakes driven into the ground. The whole structure is tensioned by rope lines that run from the canvas edges to smaller stakes arranged in a rough hexagon. When rain falls on this canvas, something interesting happens. The linen fibers absorb moisture and swell. The threads that were woven with microscopic gaps between them now press tight together, and the fabric becomes denser, more waterproof the wetter it gets. It's an elegant, self-sealing mechanism. But it comes with a critical warning touch: the wet canvas from inside, and you break the surface tension. Water that was beading on the outside suddenly has a pathway through following the point of contact. You'll create a steady drip, cold and persistent, exactly where your head or shoulder made contact. So, you lie very still. Everyone does. 6 men arranged down the center of the tent floor, leaving a narrow gap on either side between your bodies and the sloping walls. It's a discipline born from wet, miserable experience. You've heard stories of men who forgot who rolled over in their sleep and pressed against the canvas. They woke soaked through, and in temperatures barely above freezing wet equals dead. The ground beneath you is the real enemy tonight. Earth is an excellent conductor of heat when it's cold, pulling warmth from your body through direct contact. If you were lying on bare frozen ground, your core temperature would drop so fast that even violent shivering couldn't compensate. You'd be hypothermic within an hour, maybe less. The straw is your first defense. It's not much, maybe half an inch thick in most places, but it creates a dead airspace between your body and the earth. Air, when it's trapped, and still, is one of the best insulators nature provides. The straw keeps it from moving, and that makes all the difference. But straw alone isn't enough, which is why your cloak matters so much. Wool is remarkable material. Each fiber is covered in microscopic scales that trap air in tiny pockets, creating a matrix of insulation that works even when damp. That's the critical difference between wool and almost any other natural fiber. Cotton or linen lose their insulating properties when wet, collapsing and conducting heat away. But wool, even soaked through, retains some ability to keep you warm. Your cloak, right now, is serving 3 functions simultaneously. Half of it is spread beneath you, adding another layer between your body and the cold ground. The other half is pulled over you like a blanket, trapping the heat rising from your core. And because you're pressed close to the boy on one side and another soldier on the other, the edges of your cloaks overlap, creating a shared canopy that holds collective warmth better than any individual covering could. This is survival through physics. 1 cloak is marginally effective. 6 cloaks used together become genuinely useful. The boy next to you is still shivering, but less violently now. His body is young metabolism, running hot, generating heat faster than your older companions. But he's also burning through energy reserves rapidly, which means he'll crash harder later in the night if he's not careful. You can feel his back against your shoulder, the heat bleeding through layers of wool and linen. You shift slightly closer, deliberately, letting your body form a windbreak for his. Thomas, at the far end, makes a small sound, something between a grunt and a sigh. He's checking his feet, you realize. You can hear the rustle of fabric as he pulls off his boots. This is part of the evening ritual, as important as prayer. Check your feet for signs of frostbite. Look for white patches for skin that's gone waxy and numb. Catch it early and you might save your toes. Ignore it and you'll lose them, or worse. You should check yours too. You reach down, unlace your boots with fingers that are already clumsy from cold. The leather is stiff, frozen in the shape of your foot. When you finally work it off, Steam rises from inside your body heat meeting cold air. Your feet are wrapped in strips of cloth, makeshift socks that have seen better days. You unwrap them slowly, examining the skin beneath. Your toes are pale, but not white. You can wiggle them. You can feel the pins and needles of circulation. That's good. That means tissue is alive, blood is flowing. You flex them deliberately, forcing blood into the smallest vessels, making sure everything works. Dry wraps, if you have them. Thomas's voice comes from the darkness. Wet ones against your chest to dry overnight. You do. You have a second set of cloth strips slightly less filthy than the ones you just removed. You wrap your feet in these, then stuff the wet strips inside your shirt, pressing them against your ribs, where your body heat is strongest. They're shockingly cold at first, but your core temperature will slowly warm them through the night, and tomorrow evening you'll have dry wraps again. It's a perfect closed-loop system, using your body as both living space and equipment dryer. The tent is full of small sounds now, fabric rustling as men adjust positions, breathing 6 different rhythms not yet synchronized. Someone's stomach growls loudly, and there's a brief ripple of quiet laughter. Hunger is a constant companion on campaign, but at least hunger can be joked about. But there are companions you cannot joke about. As the warmth builds under the cloaks, the invisible enemies wake up. You feel a sudden, sharp itch near your waistline lice. They thrive in the seams of the damp wool, and as your body heat activates them, they begin to crawl. You can feel their tiny, maddening movements against your skin. You want to scratch, to tear off the clothes and hunt them down, but you can't. Opening your cloak means letting the cold in. Moving too much means disturbing the seal of warmth you've built with your neighbors. So you grit your teeth and endure the sensation of being eaten alive, slowly by creatures too small to fight with a sword. The dampness of the wool also begins to register, not just as texture, but as a threat. It feels heavy, clinging to your skin like a cold sweat, a breeding ground for rashes and rot. In this moment, the lice and the damp feel like active agents of the winter, trying to break your resolve from the inside out. Outside, the camp has mostly settled. You can still hear voices, but they're farther away now, guards on the perimeter checking passwords. The wind hasn't stopped. It probably won't all night. It flows over the tent in steady waves, making the canvas snap softly, rhythmically. It's almost hypnotic, that sound. Almost. The temperature inside the tent is perhaps 2 or 3 degrees warmer than outside. That's all. The canvas breaks the wind, which is enormous, because wind is what really kills. Moving air pulls heat away from exposed skin through convection, replacing warm air with the cold air constantly. Still air, even cold still air, allows a thin layer of warmth to cling to your body. The tent provides that stillness, that small mercy. But it provides nothing else. No heat source, no insulation beyond a single layer of fabric. The frost you saw forming on the inside of the canvas earlier is growing thicker now, crystals building, where moisture from the ground and from 6 pairs of lungs has condensed. You can see it in the dim light filtering through from fires outside, a delicate lace pattern spreading across the interior walls. Don't touch it. The warning echoes in your head. Don't brush against it, even accidentally. You're wearing everything you own. Your linen shirt damp with old sweat. Your gambeson, the quilted jacket that served as armor this morning and now serves as insulation. It's made of layers of linen stuffed with wool scraps stitched together in a diamond pattern to prevent the filling from shifting. When dry, it's genuinely warm. Right now, it's just heavy and slightly moist, holding cold against your shoulders. Your cloak over that. Your boots set carefully to one side where you can reach them quickly if needed. Though reaching for them means exposing your feet to cold air, means sacrificing warmth for readiness. It's a calculation every soldier makes. Do you value warmth or speed? There's no right answer. The boy shifts beside you, trying to get comfortable. The straw crackles beneath him. He's learned not to talk much, which is good. Talking wastes energy, moisture, heat. Silence is survival. Above you, through the gap at the tent's peak where the two pieces of canvas meet imperfectly, you can see a single star. It's very bright, though you don't know its name. Medieval soldiers, sometimes named stars, gave them meanings, told stories about what they represented. This one is steady and cold and indifferent, a pinpoint of light in darkness that will still be there when you're gone. The tent is also a social space, which matters more than structure. In the manor houses where nobles sleep, privacy is status. Important people have rooms with doors. They can close themselves off. But here, privacy doesn't exist. 6 men sharing maybe 40 square feet of space. You hear everything. Every breath, every swallow, every small bodily function. This forced intimacy creates its own kind of bond. You're not alone in the cold. You're not bearing the night in isolation. The presence of the boy's back against your shoulder. The sound of Thomas breathing steadily at the tent's end. The weight of shared cloaks. These things create a psychological warmth almost as important as the physical kind. Someone passes wind. Nobody comments. Everyone's bodies are working hard, digestive systems, trying to extract every calorie from whatever food was eaten, generating heat as a byproduct. Flatulence is just part of the landscape here, like mud or cold or the smell of wet wool. The gambeson you're wearing is also damp like everything else you own. It absorbed moisture from rain days ago and never fully dried. When you move, you can feel cold spots where water has condensed. They press against your ribs like small accusations. By morning, some of that moisture will have frozen, and you'll wake with ice crystals in the fabric. It's happened before. It'll happen again. This is what medieval life felt like at the molecular level. Everything perpetually damp. Everything smelling of mildew and smoke and bodies. Nothing ever quite clean, never quite dry. The line between person and environment blurred until you couldn't tell where your body ended and the cold began. And yet, inside this inadequate shelter among these strangers who have become brothers through proximity, there's a kind of stability. The tent doesn't promise comfort. It doesn't promise safety or warmth. What it promises is containment, a space that's marginally better than the space outside, a place where the wind is broken, where rain is mostly blocked, where cold, while still present, is at least predictable. You lie there, feeling the straw beneath you, the wool around you, the bodies beside you, and you understand something about survival that can't be taught, only experienced. It isn't about individual heroism. It's about systems, small interlocking adaptations that taken together create a margin just wide enough to keep death at bay. The canvas that swells when wet, the straw that insulates from below, the wool that holds warmth even damp, the collective heat of bodies arranged deliberately, the knowledge passed from veteran to recruit about how to position yourself, where to place your hands, when to stay still. This habitat isn't impressive. It wouldn't pass any modern standard, but it works. Not well, Not comfortably, but reliably enough that armies could campaign through winter after winter, that men could march through rain and cold, knowing that at day's end there would be this canvas straw wool and the small defiant warmth created together. Outside, the temperature continues its steady drop. Inside, you close your eyes and wait for sleep or something like it. Your body is working harder now than it did during the march. That might seem wrong, counterintuitive even, but it's true. While your mind drifts toward unconsciousness, every cell in your body is burning fuel to generate heat. Your metabolism has shifted into survival mode, prioritizing warmth over everything else. Your heart is beating faster than you'd expect for someone lying still, pushing blood to your extremities and back, trying to maintain temperature in fingers and toes that want to go numb. The work begins before you even attempt to sleep. You can hear Thomas on the other end of the tent, still checking his equipment. The soft scrape of a knife being run along a whetstone, keeping the edge sharp. The rustle of fabric as he arranges his bow inside his cloak, keeping the wood from warping in the cold and damp. These small acts of maintenance are survival rituals passed down through generations of soldiers. Your equipment keeps you alive. You keep your equipment functional. The cycle is sacred. You should check yours too. Your bow is already inside your cloak, unstrung, the string wrapped separately and tucked against your chest where body heat will keep it dry. Wood and sinew don't respond well to extreme moisture and cold. If the bow takes on too much water, the limbs will lose their spring. The string will stretch and lose tension. By morning, you'd have a useless piece of bent wood instead of a weapon. Your knife is at your belt, close enough to reach quickly, but not pressing uncomfortably against your hip. You've positioned it carefully, angled just so. In the dark, if you need it fast, muscle memory will guide your hand. You practice the motion once, twice, just to be sure. Some habits are worth the energy expenditure. The boy beside you is settling now, his shivering reduced to occasional tremors. His breathing has slowed from the quick, panicked rhythm of earlier to something more sustainable. You can feel his back against your shoulder, the heat bleeding through. He's young enough that his body still generates warmth, efficiently old enough to have learned not to waste it on unnecessary movement. Someone passes around a piece of hard bread. It appears from the darkness, pushed from hand to hand. When it reaches you, you break off a portion no bigger than your thumb and pass the rest along. The bread is stale, maybe days old, hard enough that you have to work it with your teeth before you can swallow. But it's food, and food is fuel. Your digestive system will break down these carbohydrates over the next hours, releasing energy that your body will convert partially into heat. It's not enough to make you warm, but it's enough to shift the equation from dangerous to survivable. Medieval soldiers understood this empirically, even if they didn't know the biochemistry. Eat before sleeping, even a little. Even if you're not hungry, the man on your other side, the one with the scarred face, produces a small leather flask from inside his shirt. It's been there all day, kept from freezing by body heat. He takes a careful sip, barely wetting his lips, then passes it around. When it reaches you, you taste wine, thin and sour, cut with water, until it's barely alcoholic. You take only a swallow. The liquid creates a brief illusion of warmth as it goes down, but you know that's all it is, illusion. Alcohol dilates blood vessels near your skin, which actually causes you to lose heat faster. The smart soldier drinks just enough to lift spirits without endangering survival. Now comes the arrangement of bodies, the final choreography, before attempting sleep. 6 men need to fit in a space barely wide enough for 4. You lie on your sides, all facing the same direction, because that configuration maximizes contact and minimizes gaps where cold air can slip between bodies. Your back presses against the boy's chest. His knees fit into the bend of yours. Your nose is inches from the back of the man in front of you. You can smell him. The accumulated scent of a body that hasn't bathed in weeks, wool that hasn't been washed in months, leather that's absorbed sweat and rain and smoke. It doesn't bother you the way it might have when you first joined. Smell is just information now. It tells you someone is alive, breathing, generating heat. The cloaks are arranged over the line of bodies, overlapping and tucked where possible. Thomas has found an extra scrap of canvas, probably from a damaged tent, and layered it on top for additional wind protection. Every little bit helps. There's no such thing as too much insulation when the only heat source is your own metabolism. If you need to piss, use the corner near the entrance. Thomas's voice comes from the darkness. Don't go outside unless you absolutely must. You'll lose too much heat, and it's harder to get it back than to keep it. There is a spot designated for this, you realize. A small depression someone dug earlier. It's one more detail in the complex web of survival knowledge that makes the difference between functioning and failing. And if someone stops breathing right, Thomas adds, wake them. Sometimes cold makes you sleep too deep. That's when it takes you. He's talking about hypothermia's subtle onset, the way it can make someone lethargic and confused, drifting into a state that looks like sleep, but is actually the first stage of shutdown. Out here, you're responsible not just for yourself, but for the men beside you. Their survival depends on your attention. Yours depends on theirs. The last light outside has faded completely. The tent is now a pocket of darkness, relieved only by the faintest red glow from the brazier visible through the opening. You can hear the man on fire watch out there, adding small twigs to keep the coals alive. It's lonely work sitting awake while everyone else sleeps, but it's essential. That tiny fire is insurance. You try to relax, to let your muscles soften into the straw and wool. But relaxation doesn't come easily. The cold is still there, a constant presence you can't ignore. You're not freezing, but you're not comfortable. You exist somewhere between a margin that requires constant small adjustments. You drift, but you do not truly sink. The wind howls a long, mournful sound that vibrates the canvas, sounding like 1,000 voices screaming in the distance. Every time the tent flap flutters, a draft slices through the tent like a knife, and you feel the boy flinch in his sleep. You wake periodically, not from noise, but from the discipline of cold. Your toes ache with a deep, throbbing dullness. You force yourself to flex them inside the wool wraps, once, twice, 10 times. It hurts. It burns. But the pain is reassuring. Thomas is awake too. You hear him whispering a password to a passing guard, a harsh hiss of syllables that dissolves instantly into the wind. Then something shifts at your feet. The camp dog, having found no better shelter, has wormed its way under the tent flap. It curls against your boots, a dense, hot weight. You don't kick it out. Its fur is coarse and smells of wet earth, but it radiates a feral, intense heat that seeps into your frozen toes. In medieval times, this was the core of medieval life winter survival skills like these, where a stray animal becomes a treasured heat source. And pain is just a signal that you are still alive. You shift slightly, trying to find a position where the straw doesn't poke through your cloak, where your hip doesn't press directly against frozen ground. The boy behind you shifts too automatically, matching your movement. The whole line of bodies adjusts like a single organism finding equilibrium. This is the work of sleep. Not the unconscious drift you experience in a warm bed, but an active process of maintaining warmth through position and proximity. Your body will wake you periodically through the night, not because of dreams, but because of cold. Each time you'll make tiny corrections, pulling your cloak tighter, pressing closer to your neighbors, flexing your toes inside their wrappings to keep blood flowing. Between those wakings, you'll descend into something that's not quite sleep, but not quite wakefulness either. A state where your mind disengages, but your body remains vigilant, monitoring temperature and comfort and the presence of others. This is how humans slept for most of history. The idea of 8 uninterrupted hours is modern, made possible by heating and security that medieval people couldn't imagine. But here now, the old pattern reasserts itself. You'll sleep in segments, wake naturally after a few hours, lie awake for a time, then drift off again. Historians call it biphasic sleep, and it was the norm until industrial times changed our relationship with darkness. In a military camp, that middle wakeful period serves functions beyond rest. It's when guards change shift, when men relieve themselves, when someone checks that the brazier coals are still alive. When the truly vigilant, like Thomas, do a silent census of breathing, making sure everyone is still okay. In medieval times, this was the core of medieval life. Winter survival skills like these were not just about gear, but about the discipline of the mind during these wakeful hours. You wake up not because you are rested, but because a draft has found its way down your neck, cold as a knife blade. You lie there, eyes open in the pitch black, listening. The wind has changed. It's no longer just blowing, it's hunting. You hear it tearing at the trees in the distance, a low roar like the ocean before it rushes across the field to slap the side of your tent. The canvas snaps, thwack, violent and sudden. The wood of the ridgepole groans under the strain. Every creak sounds like a failure waiting to happen. You hold your breath, waiting to see if the stakes will hold, if the shelter will collapse and leave you exposed. Thomas whispers something in the dark. It's the password for the night repeated to himself, or maybe a name. The sound is startlingly loud. It reminds you that vigilance never sleeps. You flex your toes inside your boots and the pain is immediate. A dull, throbbing ache that runs up your shins. The cold has settled into your joints like sand. You have to grit your teeth to keep from groaning as you rotate your ankles, forcing sluggish blood to move. Then a shifting weight at your feet. The camp dog has found its way in. You feel a heavy, furry mass press against your lower legs. It's wet and smells of wet dog, but the heat radiating from it is intense. No one kicks it out. That animal heat is a gift. You can feel the dog's heart beating against your shin, a rapid thump, thump, thump that seems to race against the slow, cold rhythm of the night. It's a moment of pure interspecies solidarity. Two living things conspiring to steal one more hour of life from the winter. You won't sleep well tonight. That's a given. But you'll sleep enough. Your body will extract what rest it can from these horizontal hours, even if comfort eludes you. And tomorrow, when Thomas wakes you before dawn, you'll rise and march again, carrying this tent and this knowledge forward to the next camp, the next cold night. For now, though, you let your breathing slow. Let your mind begin to wander. Feel the warmth of the boy against your back, the bulk of the man in front, the distant sounds of the camp settling. A dog barks somewhere, sharp and sudden, then silence. The wind continues its steady press against the canvas. Someone in the tent sighs deeply, already asleep or close to it. You think about home wherever that is. A village you haven't seen in months. A family who might not know if you're alive or dead. But thinking about home is dangerous. It makes the present harder to bear. So you push those thoughts away deliberately and focus on the immediate. The sensation of straw beneath your hip, the weight of wool over your shoulders, the rhythm of breathing around you. The work of sleep has begun. Your body is burning calories, maintaining temperature, fighting a war of attrition against the cold. It will do this all night, every night, until spring comes, or the campaign ends, or you die. Tonight, you're betting on survival. 6 bodies pressed together in darkness, sharing what little warmth exists, refusing to surrender to the cold. That's the wager. That's the work. And somewhere in the small hours before dawn, if you're lucky, you'll find something that resembles rest. The servant has left. The fire in the hearth burns low, just embers now glowing faintly. And then the candle on the bedside table gutters and goes out. The darkness of the castle descends. It is a thick, absolute darkness. Not the darkness of a modern city where streetlights glow through curtains and electronic devices cast faint blue glows. This is medieval darkness. Complete. Total. The kind of darkness that feels almost solid, like you could reach out and touch it. You blink, but your eyes do not adjust. There is nothing to adjust to. No light enters this chamber. The arrow slit is too narrow, the shutters too thick. The fire has died to embers too dim to illuminate anything beyond their own faint glow. You could hold your hand an inch from your face and not see it. In the medieval mind, darkness was not just the absence of light. It was a presence in itself, a thing with weight and substance, and it brought dangers. Physicians of the time followed the humoral theory inherited from the ancient Greeks. They believed the human body contained 4 fluids, 4 humors that needed to be kept in balance: blood phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Sleep, they taught, cooled the body. It was a time when the natural heat of life diminished, when the humors grew sluggish and slow. And if the body became too cold during sleep, the humors could congeal. The blood could thicken. The phlegm could choke the lungs. Excessive cold during sleep, they warned, could lead to death. Not from freezing exactly, but from the imbalance it created in the body's internal systems. Keeping warm, then, was not just about comfort. It was literally a matter of keeping your life force flowing, keeping your humors liquid and balanced, keeping death at bay. You lie in the darkness thinking about this. Your breath forms clouds in the cold air above the bed, though you cannot see them. You can only feel the moisture on your lips, the faint chill as you inhale. Am I warm enough? Will I wake in the morning? Or will the cold find a way through my defenses? These are not idle fears. People died in their sleep in winter. Not often, perhaps, but it happened. enough that everyone knew someone who had gone to bed and never woken up. Found in the morning stiff and cold, their lips blue, their skin waxy. The cold took them in the night, silently, without warning. But the darkness held other dangers too, spiritual ones. This was the wolf hour, the time when demons and evil spirits were said to roam the corridors of castles and the streets of towns. The hours between midnight and dawn, when the barrier between the world of the living and the world of the dead grew thin. Church teachings were clear. The night was Satan's time. The darkness was his domain. And while you slept vulnerable and unaware, dark forces could slip into your chamber, into your dreams, into your soul. People protected themselves with prayers and charms. A crucifix hung above the bed, a verse from the Psalms whispered before sleep, holy water sprinkled on the threshold. And there were older protections too, pre-Christian customs that had survived woven into the fabric of daily life despite the church's disapproval. A quirky detail from a German household manual advises sleepers to place a piece of iron, a knife or a scissor under the pillow or mattress. Iron, it was believed, repelled evil spirits and nightmares. Demons could not cross iron. They would turn away seeking easier prey. You reach under your pillow now, feeling in the darkness. Your fingers brush against something cold and hard. Metal. You grasp it, pulling it out slightly. A knife. Small. Sharp. You run your thumb carefully along the blade, testing its edge. It is well made, well maintained. You slide it back under the pillow, feeling a strange comfort from its presence. It is a talisman against the unseen, a small piece of protection against the vast darkness that surrounds you. Rational, perhaps not. But in a world without electricity, without street lights, without any way to drive back the night, such charms mattered. They gave comfort. They gave control. You are not helpless against the darkness. You have iron. You have prayers. You have the walls of your fortress bed. You settle back into the pillows, pulling the fur coverlet tighter around your shoulders. The weight presses down. The warmth, such as it is, holds steady. Your senses heighten now that your sight is gone. You hear things you would have missed in daylight. The settling of the castle. The stone groaning as it cools, contracting minutely in the night air. Tiny sounds barely audible, but distinct in the silence. Creak. Crack. You hear the scurry of a mouse somewhere in the rushes on the floor. The faint scratch of tiny claws on stone. A pause. Then more scurrying, fading into the distance. You hear the wind outside moaning against the battlements. It rises and falls, never quite ceasing a constant presence. Sometimes it sounds almost like voices, wordless and mournful, crying to be let in. You hear the breathing of the castle itself, the slight whistle of air moving through cracks and passages, the distant echoing drip of water somewhere deep in the walls. These sounds do not frighten you. They are the sounds of life, the sounds of a building that is occupied, inhabited, lived in. Far more frightening would be silence, true silence, because that would mean you were alone, utterly alone. And in the darkness of a medieval night, being alone was the greatest danger of all. But you are not alone, not truly. Somewhere in the castle, others are sleeping. Servants in their quarters, guards on the walls, family in nearby chambers. You are part of a community, however invisible it might be in this moment. And that thought, more than any charm or weapon, gives you comfort. There is a profound intimacy in this shared darkness. In the modern world, we use light to separate ourselves, to create individual islands of activity. But here, the darkness unifies. Everyone in the castle, from the lord in his tower to the scullery maid in the kitchen, is subject to the same rhythm. When the sun goes down, the world shrinks. Horizons vanish. All that remains is the immediate circle of warmth and the people within it. It forces a kind of closeness, a reliance on one another that we have largely forgotten. The darkness presses close. But you are safe inside your fortress bed, safe behind your curtains, safe beneath your layers. You close your eyes, even though it makes no difference to what you can see. And slowly, gradually, you begin to drift. Your sleep deepens, and with depth come dreams. You dream of the world outside the walls, the vast, silent landscape of snow stretching in every direction. In the dream, the wind hums, blowing white drifts across the plains. It is a cold world, a world of ice and stillness. You see the castle in the distance, standing grey against the white sky. Icicles hang from the battlements, glistening like glass. The entire structure looks quiet, enduring the weight of winter. You feel the chill in the dream, a faint coolness touching your face. It is the memory of the cold you felt earlier, the memory of the wind on the stairs, the memory of the frozen stone. And then gently you stir. You float back up toward consciousness, not with a start, but slowly, like surfacing from deep water. For a moment, the image of the snow lingers, but immediately you feel the reality, the weight of the blankets pressing down on you, heavy, secure, the solid warmth of the dog at your feet, the faint red glow of the embers in the hearth. You are not out there in the snow. You are here, in your bed. The dream was just a shadow, a reminder of the harsh world outside, which makes the warmth inside feel even sweeter. You breathe deeply. The air in the room is cool, tasting faintly of smoke. But under the furs, you are an island of heat. You lie still, listening to the safe sounds of the chamber. The servants' slow breathing, the dog's gentle snoring, the soft crackle of the banked fire, the drip of condensation somewhere in the walls. All of it real, all of it proof that the fortress is holding. You are alive. You are warm enough. You are safe. The cold outside cannot reach you here. It is just a dream now, a picture in your mind that fades as you settle deeper into the mattress. You close your eyes again. The snowy landscape is gone. Now there is only the dark, and the warmth, and the stillness. You drift back down, deeper this time, into a sleep without dreams, just rest, just peace, until the dawn comes. Use the spot too. Maybe they're just cold and uncomfortable. Or maybe they're keeping watch like Thomas, taking informal turns being alert while others rest. This is part of survival strategy, though no one discusses it explicitly. In a tent full of near strangers who have become brothers through proximity, you trust that someone will be awake if danger comes. You trust that if you stop breathing, someone will notice. That trust is what allows any sleep at all. The cold is doing something else now, making you need to urinate again. Already, you just went. But the cycle is relentless. You're not going to the spot again. Not this soon. You'll hold it. Deal with the discomfort. The cold has won too many victories tonight already. Around you, the tent continues its night sounds. The snoring hasn't stopped. Someone coughs that deep, wet cough that suggests illness and doesn't stop for long seconds. When they finally do, you hear them spit. Nobody comments. Respiratory infections move through camps like smoke, passing from man to man through proximity and shared breath. You wonder if you'll get sick. You probably will eventually. Everyone does. The combination of cold, damp, poor nutrition and close quarters is perfect for disease. Coughs that won't go away, fevers, diarrhea. These kill more soldiers than swords. They're the real enemy, silent and patient. But not tonight. Tonight, you're still healthy. Your lungs are clear, your stomach is settled, you're cold and uncomfortable and exhausted. But you're not sick. That's enough. The experience of night in a medieval camp is something most modern people will never know. Not the darkness exactly. Anyone can experience darkness. But the combination of cold discomfort, fear, and community, the way those elements blend into something almost transcendent. You're acutely aware of being alive. Every breath, every heartbeat, every small shift of position is a conscious act of survival. There's no autopilot, no drifting into oblivion. You're present for every minute of this long night. And yet, there's also peace in it. You're not alone. 6 men breathing together in darkness. 6 men sharing warmth and space and the small vulnerabilities of sleep. Whatever happens, you'll face it together. This is the heart of medieval winter survival. Not the battles which are brief, not the marches which are finite, but these nights, one after another, where survival is collective effort, and every morning is quiet miracle. You close your eyes again. Your bladder still insists, but you ignore it. Your body is still cold, but you've stopped shivering. The boy has shifted his arm now, draped over your side, heavy and warm. You don't move it. Warmth is currency, and no one here is rich enough to refuse it. That weight on your side is more than just physical mass. It is a thermal anchor. Through the thin layers of linen and wool, you can feel the boy's pulse beating against your ribs, a slow, rhythmic thud that feels incredibly stubborn against the howling void outside. Thump, 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 thump. It is the biological clock of medieval life, ticking away seconds of warmth in a universe of cold. You feel his breath shallow and regular, ghosting against the back of your neck. It's a humid, living warmth that contrasts sharply with the air trying to slice through the tent flaps. The wind outside picks up, screaming through the tent ropes, with a sound that reminds you of a bowing cello string pushed to the breaking point. It is a reminder that the warmth you hold is not a right. It is a temporary loan. In the darkness, Thomas shifts his voice, barely a tremor in the blackness. Had a brother once. He whispers the words so quiet they might be your own thoughts. Fell asleep, warm, didn't wake. The cold acts like a thief, quiet and soft. He doesn't finish the story. He doesn't have to. The silence that follows is heavy with the weight of ghosts. You instinctively press closer to the boy, guarding that pulse against your ribs, as if it were a flickering candle flame in a gale. This fragile moment is the heart of winter survival skills in medieval times. It is the terrifying realization that the only thing separating you from the history books is the heat radiating from the stranger beside you. In a medieval documentary, they might talk about tactics and armor, but they rarely capture this. The desperate, tender geometry of limbs tangled together to defy the frost. Somewhere far off, a sound that might be fox or might be human. It's gone before you can identify it. The night continues. The cold continues. And you drift back towards something almost like sleep, knowing that in a few hours, maybe just one, you'll wake again and repeat this process. the experience of night, the work of survival, the small defiances of warmth in a world determined to freeze you. You are hovering on the edge of sleep when you feel a weight shift at the bottom of the bed. A heavy, warm lump presses against your feet, pushing through the layers of fabric. You tense for a moment, startled, but then you hear it. A soft huff of breath, the faint jingle of a collar, the rustle of fur settling. A dog. You relax immediately. The dog has jumped onto the bed as it does every night, claiming its place at your feet. You can feel its warmth now radiating through the covers. More warmth than the stone, more reliable than the coals in the warming pan. But notice something else. As the animal settles, you feel a faint tremor in its body, a shiver. Its paws pressing against the linen through the blanket are cold, chilled by the frozen flagstones it has walked on all day. The castle is hard on everyone. This creature has spent its hours patrolling icy courtyards, its breath misting in the air just like yours, its coat stiff with frost from the bailey. It seeks this bed not just to serve you, but to survive alongside you. In this moment, the hierarchy of master and beast dissolves. You are simply two warm-blooded creatures huddled together against the infinite indifferent chill of the stone. It is a pact of mutual survival. Historians remind us that in many medieval households, animals were the most effective space heaters available. Dogs, especially large breeds like mastiffs or hunting hounds, generated an enormous amount of body heat. Their thick fur and high metabolism meant they were essentially living furnaces. And unlike a fire that could go out, unlike a stone that would eventually cool a dog, stayed warm all night long. The practice of allowing dogs into beds was widespread, though not always approved of by the church. Clerics preached against it, calling it unclean and improper. They said it degraded human dignity to share sleeping space with beasts. But in the dead of a northern European winter, theology lost to biology. Warmth won. Peasants and nobles alike welcomed dogs into their beds. The animals provided heat, yes, but also companionship, security. A dog would wake if danger approached. Its ears would prick at sounds too faint for human hearing. Its growl would alert you to intruders long before they reached your chamber. You may have heard the phrase, "three-dog night." While the exact origins of the phrase are debated, the concept is purely medieval. A one-dog night is cold but manageable. You need one dog to keep your feet warm. A two-dog night is meant the cold had breached the room. You needed a second guardian to shield your back. You need dogs at your feet and at your back. But a three-dog night, that is bone-chilling cold. You need 3 animals in the bed just to survive until morning. One account from a monastery in Scotland describes a particularly harsh winter in the 1360s, when even the monks who were supposed to live in austere simplicity allowed dogs into their cells. The abbot granted special dispensation, ruling that survival took precedence over purity. Better to live in the company of a dog than to freeze to death in solitary piety. Yet scholars debate how universal this practice really was among the nobility. Some argue that only the common people and lower-ranking servants regularly slept with animals. The nobility, they insist, would have found it beneath their dignity. But the evidence suggests otherwise. Wills and household accounts mention favourite dogs by name, gifts of fine collars and cushions, instructions that certain hounds be allowed to sleep in their master's chamber. The bond between medieval people and their dogs was deep and genuine. These were not just working animals, they were companions, friends, and on cold nights they were saviors. Think of your own life for a moment. Today in our modern world we have central heating. We have thermostats. We do not need a dog to keep from freezing to death. And yet, we still invite them up. We still let them curl at the foot of the bed. We still find a profound comfort in that heavy rhythmic breathing in the dark. Why, perhaps it is a memory written in our DNA, an ancient echo of these very nights in the 14th century. We remember deep in our bones that the dog is the guardian of the light. When the world is dark and cold, their presence is the only assurance that we are not alone. That feeling of safety you get when a pet sleeps beside you. It is the same feeling a medieval knight felt 600 years ago. You flex your toes now, pressing them gently against the dog's side. The animal shifts slightly, adjusting its position, but does not wake. You feel the weight of its chin resting heavily on your ankle, a gesture of absolute trust. Its breathing is slow and steady, deep, contented. The smell of the dog reaches you now, musky, earthy, the scent of fur that has been out in the weather that has run through grass and mud and snow. It is not unpleasant. It is the smell of life, of something warm-blooded and alive. You can hear its breathing clearly in the darkness. Huff, puff, huff, puff. A rhythmic sound, steady, reassuring. It is the sound of safety. If an intruder came, the dog would wake. It would bark. It would alert you. Since the dog is sleeping peacefully, you know that all is well. You are guarded, protected. You curl your toes deeper into the dog's fur, seeking its warmth. The heat travels up through your feet into your ankles, your calves. You feel your leg muscles relax, the tension draining away. You are borrowing life from another creature, stealing its warmth, and the dog, in its simple animal wisdom, gives it freely. This is its purpose. This is its place. In the morning, you will feed it scraps from your table. You will praise it and stroke its head. And tonight, it will keep you alive. That is the bargain. That is the bond. You sigh deeply, feeling yourself sink further into the mattress. The dog's warmth, combined with the heated sheets and the stone and the layers of fabric, has finally created something approaching comfort. You are still cold. Your face is cold. Your hands are cold. But the core of your body is warm enough. The parts that matter are protected. And in this small castle, in this frozen corner of northern Europe, that is all anyone can ask for. Shivering stops. That's when you worry, because when shivering stops, it doesn't mean the person has warmed up. It means their core temperature has dropped too low to afford the energy cost of shivering. Their body is conserving what little heat remains for vital organs. Heart, brain, lungs. After that comes confusion, slurred speech, clumsy movements. The person might insist they're fine, might even insist they're warm. They might start taking off clothes paradoxically because hypothermia causes blood vessels to dilate in a last desperate attempt to circulate what warmth remains. This false sensation of heat is the final stage before unconsciousness. If you see someone reach this point, there's only one response. Get them warm immediately, not gradually, not carefully, immediately. Strip off their wet clothes. Sandwich them between two warm bodies, skin to skin if necessary. Force them to drink something warm if you have it. Keep them awake. Talk to them. Slap them if you must. Because if they fall asleep in that state, they won't wake up. Thomas has done this. saved men by pressing his naked chest against theirs, sharing his body heat in the most direct way possible. There's no sexuality in this, no shame, just desperate biology. One warm body trying to restart another's failing metabolism. He's also failed. Found men in the morning who went to sleep cold and simply never generated enough heat to keep their hearts beating. Their faces were peaceful. "That's what stays with him," he said once. How peaceful they looked, as if dying from cold was just drifting into deeper sleep. The knowledge extends to equipment too. Your bow unstrung and tucked inside your cloak is there because wood changes in cold. It becomes brittle. If you left it strung overnight, the constant tension combined with cold would weaken the limbs. They might crack when you tried to draw tomorrow. The string, if left exposed, would absorb moisture from the air and stretch. You'd lose draw weight, lose accuracy, effectively lose your weapon. So you keep the bow close to your body heat. You keep the string wrapped and dry. You check them both before sleep and again at dawn. This ritual repeated every night is what keeps medieval armies functional. Not grand strategy, not heroic leadership, but small obsessive care of the tools that keep you alive. There's knowledge about fire too. The brazier outside, barely visible through the tent opening, contains coals that have been kept alive since the evening meal. Keeping fire alive is critical. Starting fire from scratch with flint and steel is possible, but it requires dry tinder, steady hands, and patience. At 3 in the morning with frozen fingers, it's nearly impossible. So someone is always tending the brazier, adding small twigs just enough to keep the coals from dying completely. Not enough to create flames, which would waste fuel and create light that could give away the camp's position. Just coals, patient, glowing, ready to burst into flame when needed. This is survival technology refined over centuries. The clay pot that holds the coals is cracked and repaired with wire, but it works. The charcoal inside burns cleaner and hotter than wood produces less smoke. Someone somewhere in the supply chain spent days making that charcoal burning wood in low oxygen conditions to drive out moisture and volatile compounds, leaving almost pure carbon. All of this knowledge, all these techniques were bought with cold nights and lost lives. Every piece of wisdom represents someone who survived to teach it, and probably someone else who died teaching the lesson. This is how humans adapt to hostile environments, through tragedy and observation, and the stubborn refusal to repeat mistakes. You're wrapped in this knowledge right now. The way you're lying, the position of your hands, the cloak pulled over your head, the bow inside your shirt. All of it represents accumulated human experience. You're not tougher than modern people. You don't have some special medieval hardiness. What you have is technique, method, the collective wisdom of everyone who slept cold before you and lived to pass on what worked. And tomorrow night, if you survive, you'll pass this knowledge to the next recruit. You'll show them how to check their feet, how to position their cloak, how to share warmth without shame. And the cycle will continue. That's the real story of medieval winter survival. Not individual heroism, not superior strength, but knowledge carefully preserved and deliberately shared, creating a chain of survival that stretches back through generations. The cold teaches hard lessons. But if you listen, if you learn, if you remember, you might live long enough to teach someone else. Time passes. You do not know how much. Minutes, hours. The darkness makes it impossible to tell. But then, quite suddenly, you are awake. Not gradually, not the slow drift upward from dreams. Just awake. Your eyes open. The darkness is unchanged. The cold is unchanged. The dog still sleeps at your feet. But you are awake fully and completely, as if someone had shaken your shoulder. This is not insomnia. This is the watch, or what historians call first sleep and second sleep. Medieval people did not sleep through the night the way modern people do. They went to bed shortly after sundown, exhausted from a day of physical labor and limited artificial light. And they slept deeply for 4 or 5 hours. But then around midnight or 1 in the morning, they woke up, naturally, easily, as if their bodies contained internal clocks that told them it was time. And they stayed awake for an hour, sometimes 2. Historical records are full of references to this. People describe getting up during the watch to tend fires, to check on animals, to say prayers. They write letters. They talk quietly with their spouses. They eat small snacks. They think about their dreams. It was not seen as a problem. It was normal, expected, part of the natural rhythm of sleep. The darkness of medieval nights was so complete and so long, especially in winter, that sleeping straight through would have been impossible. The body needed a break, a pause. And so people developed this 2-phase pattern. First sleep, then the watch, then second sleep, which would carry them through to dawn. You lie in the darkness now, fully awake, and you are not anxious about it. This is how sleep works. You accept it. Somewhere in the castle you hear a bell ring. Dong, dong, dong. It is the monastery bell, perhaps half a mile away. The monks are waking for matins, the night prayers. Even in the dead of winter they rise from their beds and file into the cold chapel to sing psalms in the darkness. The sound of the bell fades. Silence returns. You hear other sounds now, faint, distant. The castle coming alive in a quiet, shadowy way. Somewhere below, a servant is tending the fire in the great hall. You hear the faint crack of a log being broken and the hiss of wood catching flame. The person moves carefully, trying not to wake the sleepers on the benches nearby. In another part of the building, someone coughs, a dry, rasping sound that echoes briefly and then stops. These small sounds are comforting. They remind you that you are not alone. The castle breathes. The castle lives. In the shadows of the room, your eyes find a shape hanging above the doorframe, a bough of holly and ivy brought in from the woods. It is a common custom bringing evergreens inside during the deep freeze. Why? Because they stay green when the world turns white. They are a promise. Seeing the dark leaves in the gloom reminds you that the earth has not died. It is merely sleeping. Winter is not an end, but a waiting. This thought, the certainty of spring's return, warms you in a way that fire cannot. And then a sound reaches you through the 12 feet of stone. Faint, rhythmic, thud, thud, thud. It is the footstep of the sentry on the battlements above. He's out there in the wind, walking the freezing stone so you do not have to. He carries the burden of alertness. In the medieval world, sleep was a shared responsibility. Some slept so others could watch. Some watched so others could sleep. Hearing his heavy boots is not a disturbance. It is a permission. You can let go of your own vigilance. The castle has eyes. You are free to drift. You shift slightly under your covers, careful not to disturb the dog. Your hand slides out from under the blankets, feeling for the bedside table. Your fingers close around a wooden cup. You lift it carefully and bring it to your lips. The liquid inside is cool now, no longer warm, but it is still drinkable. Ale. Weak ale, the kind brewed for daily consumption. Not strong enough to intoxicate, but thick with calories from the grain. You sip slowly, feeling it coat your throat. There is a quirky tidbit in some medical texts from this period. Physicians advised eating a night snack during the watch to keep the internal fire burning. Something warm and nourishing. Roasted leeks, they suggested, or a cup of warm ale spiced with nutmeg. The idea was that the body's heat, like a real fire, needed fuel. If you slept too long without eating, your inner warmth might diminish. You might grow too cold. The humours might congeal. So people ate during the watch. Not much, just a little something to stoke the flames. You set the cup down and lie back. Your hand finds the knife under your pillow again, and you rest your palm on it lightly. But iron is cold comfort. For the heart, there is a softer weapon. The cold metal is oddly soothing. You think about the day behind you, the work you did, the meals you ate, the conversations you had. Your mind wanders, drifting from one memory to another without urgency or purpose. This too was normal during the watch. It was a time for reflection, for prayer, for quiet thought. You reach for the rosary beads hanging by the bedpost, smooth worn wood under your fingers. You begin to whisper, Pater Noster, Ave Maria. The words are rhythmic, repetitive, hypnotic. For the medieval sleeper, prayer was the ultimate insulation. It was the belief that while the castle walls might crack and the fires might fade, there was a watchman above who never slept. This rhythm soothes your breathing, syncing your fragile human life with the eternal. For some, the watch was a time of creative work. Monks composed hymns in their heads. Poets drafted verses. Women planned the next day's weaving patterns. The silence of the deep night offered a clarity that the busy day did not. It was a stolen hour, a pocket of time outside the normal flow of existence, where the mind could roam free. It was also a time of vigilance. The watch got its name for a reason. In a castle, danger could approach under the cover of darkness. The waking period allowed people to listen, for the sound of footsteps where there should be none, for the smell of smoke that wasn't from the hearth. It was a survival mechanism ingrained over centuries. Your senses heighten. You hear the stone groaning as it cools. You hear the scurry of a mouse in the rushes. You hear the wind trying to find you. But you are safe inside your curtained fortress. Some people use this time to talk with their spouses, lying in the darkness and speaking in low voices about things that could not be discussed in the busy daylight hours. Plans, worries, dreams. Others simply lay still as you are doing now and let their minds wander. You breathe deeply in and out, feeling the weight of the blankets rise and fall with your chest. The dog at your feet sighs in its sleep, a long, contented sound. Minutes pass, or perhaps longer. You cannot tell. But gradually, slowly, you feel it coming back. The drowsiness, the heaviness in your limbs, the softening of your thoughts. Second sleep is calling you. A deeper sleep, heavier and more restorative. The sleep that will carry you through to dawn. You do not fight it. You welcome it. Your breathing slows again, deepens. Your grip on the knife loosens. And without quite knowing when it happens, you slip back under, back into dreams, back into the warm, dark place where consciousness dissolves and the night carries you forward. Their possessions down the chain. This creates an incentive where experience is rewarded materially. The longer you survive, the better your chances of continuing to survive. It's Darwinian selection applied to equipment. It also means the worst equipped soldiers are the newest ones, recruits who haven't had time to accumulate inherited gear. These are the men most likely to die from exposure. When they die, their meager possessions are claimed by slightly less new recruits, and the cycle continues. An army that's been on campaign for months has fewer men than it started with, but those remaining men are tougher, better equipped, more knowledgeable about survival. Quality goes up even as quantity goes down. Commanders understand this, which is why they sometimes accept high attrition from cold and disease. As long as they retain a core of veterans, they can rebuild. The calculus is dark but functional. The architecture of hierarchy then isn't just nobles versus commoners. It's complex layering of status and resource distribution that determines who lives and who dies. You're near the bottom, but you're not at the bottom, and you're in a tent, with men looking out for each other, which puts you ahead of those sleeping under wagons. Cold comfort, perhaps, but comfort nonetheless. As you lie here, sharing warmth with 5 men who might not know your full name, you're participating in a social contract. You're agreeing that in this small space, you all matter equally. And that agreement, that mutual commitment to collective survival, is its own form of warmth. Not physical warmth. Something deeper. The knowledge that you're not alone, not abandoned, not deemed expendable by everyone. The cold doesn't care, but you do, and so do the men beside you. Tomorrow, if you all wake up, if you all survive, you'll have maintained this small democracy of bodies one more night. The knights in their pavilions survive through privilege. You survive through solidarity. Both strategies work, but only one requires trusting the people around you with your life. Only one turns strangers into brothers, at least for the duration of a cold winter night. And that's worth something the nobles with their fires and furs will never understand. You drift on the edge of second sleep, but before you fully descend, your mind turns to the others in the castle. The people sleeping in other chambers, other corners, other spaces carved out of the cold stone. Privacy is a modern invention. In the Middle Ages, warmth was communal. Almost no one slept truly alone. Even in your chamber, you are not the only presence. The dog at your feet, yes, but there are others too. In the corner near the hearth where the last embers glow, and a servant sleeps on a pallet. You cannot see him in the darkness, but you know he is there. You can hear his breathing different from the dog's, slower, heavier. He is there to tend the fire if it threatens to go out, to fetch water if you wake thirsty, to help you dress when morning comes. But more than that, his body adds heat to the room. His breathing adds moisture to the air. His presence adds life to a space that would otherwise be a tomb. Historians describe this communal sleeping as one of the defining features of medieval life. Servants slept in their masters' chambers. Children slept in their parents' beds until they were surprisingly old. Extended families crowded together in single rooms. It was not about affection necessarily, though that played a part. It was about survival. Bodies generated heat. The more bodies in a space, the warmer that space became. Simple physics, simple biology. In the barracks below, soldiers sleep shoulder to shoulder, wrapped in their cloaks piled on straw mattresses like cordwood. Their combined breath raises the temperature of the room by several degrees, enough to make the difference between sleep and misery. In the monastery, dormitories, Monks sleep in long rows, each in his own narrow bed, but separated by mere inches. The heat of 60 men sleeping in one hall creates a thermal mass that keeps the worst of the cold at bay. Even the nobility, despite their wealth and their grand chambers, understood this principle. They did not sleep in isolation. There is a quirky social custom documented in English manorial records, the squire's privilege. A young man in training to become a knight might be granted the honour of sleeping at the foot of his lord's bed, or beside the hearth in his lord's chamber. It was considered a mark of high favour, a sign of trust and affection, but it was also intensely practical. The lord gained warmth from the young man's body. The young man gained protection and status. Both benefited. You think about this now lying in your curtained bed, the servant in the corner, the dog at your feet. The warmth they provide, the comfort of their presence. You are not alone. You do not have to face the cold alone. The battle against winter is fought together, always together. In peasant cottages, the communal nature of sleep was even more pronounced. Entire families slept in single rooms, sometimes in single beds. Parents, children, grandparents, all pressed together under one heap of blankets. There was no privacy, no separation, but there was warmth, and there was safety in numbers. A child who kicked off his blankets in the night would be warmed by his siblings on either side. A grandmother whose internal fire burned low would be kept alive by the young bodies surrounding her. One account from a village in Yorkshire describes a particularly harsh winter in the 1340s. The cold was so intense that families brought their animals inside, not into separate stalls, but into the living space itself. Goats, sheep, even a cow in one case. The animals stood or lay in the corners of the room, and their body heat combined with the heat of the humans raised the temperature enough that everyone survived. The smell must have been overwhelming, the noise too. But they lived, and in the end, that was all that mattered. You realize now how different your own time is. Modern people sleep alone in separate rooms, in separate beds. They have machines to warm their spaces. They have walls that hold heat. They do not need bodies pressed close. But they have lost something too. The comfort of knowing that if you wake in the night, you will hear another person breathing. The security of sleeping within arm's reach of someone who cares whether you wake in the morning. Medieval sleep was not private, but it was profoundly human. You listen now to the breathing in your chamber, the dog, the servant, the faint sounds of others elsewhere in the castle. Sleeping, dreaming, surviving. You are part of a web, a network of warmth and life that stretches through the building, connecting everyone. This web extends beyond the castle walls too. In the village below, families are doing the same, huddled together, sharing warmth. The castle and the village are mirrors of each other in the dark. The stone walls may separate them. Hierarchies may divide them, but the winter equalizes them. In the face of the freezing void, every human body is a precious source of heat, worthy of protection. Imagine the invisible threads of heat connecting body to body, room to room. It is a living map of the castle defined not by stone and mortar, but by breath and blood. Your breathing synchronizes with the other sounds. In, out, in, out. A rhythm shared across the castle, a collective breath, and slowly wrapped in that rhythm, you descend again into sleep. In the depths of sleep, your mind wanders to the others in the castle, who are fighting their own battles against the cold. the most vulnerable, the ones for whom winter is not just uncomfortable, but genuinely dangerous. Children, the very young with their small bodies and high surface area to volume ratios, lose heat faster than adults. Their metabolisms are high, but their bodies are so small that they cannot generate enough warmth to compensate. Without protection, a child could freeze far more quickly than a grown man or woman. You think of the nursery somewhere else in this castle, a room where several children sleep together, watched over by nurses and servants. The beds there are smaller, but the principle is the same. Layers, warmth, protection. But there are special provisions for children. Extra blankets, more bodies pressed close. The servants sleep in the same room, their adult bodies adding crucial heat. And there are the swaddling clothes. Babies especially are wrapped tightly in layer upon layer of linen, their limbs bound, their bodies immobilized. Modern people might find this cruel, but in the medieval mind, swaddling was protection. It kept the baby warm. It kept their limbs from being exposed to drafts, and it kept them still preventing them from kicking off their covers in the night and freezing. There is a curious account from a midwife's manual. It advises that babies should be rubbed with warm oil before being swaddled to open their pores and allow their natural heat to circulate. The oil also provided a thin barrier against the cold. Once swaddled, the baby would be placed in a cradle near the fire, but not too near. Close enough to benefit from the warmth, but far enough that sparks could not reach them. And through the night, someone would wake periodically to check, to make sure the fire had not died, to make sure the baby was still breathing, still warm, still alive. Because babies died, often, for many reasons. But the cold was always a factor, always a danger lurking in the winter darkness. Parents lived with constant fear. Every morning that their child woke alive and healthy was a small miracle, a victory against a world that seemed determined to take them. And then there were the elderly. Your mind turns to them now, the old men and women whose bodies no longer generated heat efficiently, whose circulation was poor, whose joints ached with every degree the temperature dropped. In peasant cottages, the elderly slept closest to the fire. It was a mark of respect, a recognition that they needed the warmth more than the young and vigorous. But it was also practical. If an old person froze in the night, it was not just a personal tragedy. It was the loss of wisdom, experience, memory. The old carried knowledge of past winters, past famines, past solutions to problems the young had never faced. They were valuable, and so they were protected. In the castle, elderly nobles had their own chambers, often smaller than the grand rooms of the young and active. Smaller chambers were easier to heat. They required less fuel, fewer tapestries, less effort, and the elderly were given the best furs, the thickest blankets, the warmest sleeping positions. There is an account from a will dated 1392. A nobleman bequeaths his finest bear fur coverlet to his elderly mother, specifying that it is to keep her warm through her remaining winters. It is a touching gesture, but it is also an acknowledgement of reality. The old need more protection, more care, more attention. Without it, they would simply fade away in the cold. One night, they would go to sleep, and they would not wake. It happened, more often than anyone wanted to admit. The old and the very young were winter's favorite victims. You think about this now from the safety of your own bed, the dog at your feet. The blankets are above you. the walls around you. You are healthy, strong, in the prime of life. The cold is uncomfortable for you, but it is not life-threatening. Not truly. But for the child in the nursery and for the old man in his small chamber, winter is a predator, stalking, patient, waiting for a moment of weakness. Every night is a gamble. Every morning is a gift. And so the castle becomes a place of constant vigilance. Servants check on the children through the night. Family members visit the elderly, ensuring the fire still burns. The covers are still in place. No one is abandoned. No one is left to face the cold alone. It is one of the few genuinely beautiful aspects of medieval life. The care for the vulnerable. The recognition that survival is not an individual effort, but a collective one. You sleep safer knowing that elsewhere in the castle others are watching. Others are tending fires. Others are checking on those who cannot check on themselves. You are part of that system, that web of mutual care. And in the morning, if all goes well, everyone will wake. Everyone will survive another night. The children will laugh. The elderly will smile. And life will continue for one more day. 5 winter mornings in a medieval camp. Not by waiting for external warmth, but by generating it yourself. Movement equals heat. Activity equals life. The sergeant returns, speaking briefly to whoever's in command of your section. Then the call comes. Stand down. Fires and breakfast. The formation dissolves immediately. Men head toward the places where fires are being started. Small flames growing as carefully preserved coals are fed kindling and then actual wood. The smoke rises in thin columns bending in the wind. You don't rush toward the fires. The veterans don't, so you don't either. There's only so much space around each flame, and it's better to wait your turn than to crowd in desperately. Desperation wastes energy. Instead, you return to your tent. The brazier outside is dead, just cold ash. But someone has a lit coal from one of the main fires, carrying it carefully in a clay pot. Thomas coaxes it into the small pile of kindling someone gathered, blowing gently until flames catch. The fire is tiny, barely substantial, but it's fire. Its warmth made visible. You hold your hands toward it, palms out, and feel heat on your skin for the first time since yesterday evening. It's not much. The fire is too small, burning too low. But it's something. The boy crouches next to you, doing the same. His face is still pale, but color is returning. He meets your eyes and manages a small nod. Thank you, the nod says. You saved my life. You nod back. That's what tent mates do. That's the unspoken contract. We keep each other alive. Someone is distributing food now, a ladle of something thin and grainy that might be porridge, a piece of hard bread. You take your portion and eat methodically, barely tasting it. The warm liquid going down your throat is more valuable than its nutritional content. Warmth from inside, joining the warmth from outside, slowly raising your core temperature back towards sustainable. The sun breaks the horizon. Actual sunlight, pale and weak, but real, begins to spread across the field. It will be hours before it provides any significant heat, but its presence is psychologically enormous. Darkness is over. Night is over. A new day has begun. You survived. The fire is dying now. Not the breakfast fire you huddled around earlier, though that's long since burned to ash. The fire I'm talking about is more metaphorical. The urgency of survival that carried you through the night has faded. The sun is up. The danger has passed. Your body understands that it no longer needs to maintain emergency protocols. And that's when the real exhaustion hits. You're sitting near your tent bow across your knees, supposedly keeping watch while others break down the canvas and pack supplies. But your mind is drifting. Your eyes keep wanting to close. The adrenaline that kept you alert through stand 2 is gone, and what's left is bone-deep weariness. The boy is already lying down again, curled up on the bare ground where the tent used to be. Someone should probably wake him, keep him moving, but everyone understands. He almost didn't make it through the night. His body needs rest more than it needs to help pack. Thomas is checking the tent canvas, examining the seams where water might have leaked through. His face is set in concentration, but you can see the exhaustion there too. In the morning light, he looks old. You've never thought of him as old before, but he must be past 40, maybe closer to 50. Ancient for a common soldier. Every winter campaign shows on his face like a scar. "This hole's getting bigger," he mutters, pointing to a thin spot near the peak. "Won't last another month." Someone will have to sew a patch added to the collection of repairs that make the tent look like a quilt. Or maybe the tent will just fail rip beyond fixing during the next storm, and you'll all be sleeping under wagon beds until command issues a replacement. If they issue a replacement. Supplies are running thin this late in the campaign season. You watch the camp breaking down around you. Tents coming down. Horses being saddled, supply wagons being loaded, the whole enterprise of this small army transforming from stationary to mobile. In an hour, maybe 2, you'll be marching again, putting miles between you and this field, moving toward wherever the commanders have decided to go next. And tonight, you'll do it all again. Find another field, set up the tent, spread the thin straw, arrange your bodies for shared warmth, fight through another cold night. How many more nights you don't know. Winter campaign season can last months. You might see 50 more dawns like this one before spring comes, or the war pauses, or something happens to end the cycle. Each night taking a little more from you. Each morning requiring a little more will to face. But you will face them, because that's what soldiers do. Endure, survive, refuse to quit, because quitting means dying, and you're not ready to die yet. You think about the boy, how close he came to slipping away. You think about all the men who didn't wake up this morning, scattered across how many camps throughout this war. You think about the night you almost froze to death early in the campaign before you learned the techniques that keep you alive. The cold teaches hard lessons, but if you survive the teaching, you become something harder than you were before. Not better necessarily, just harder, more resistant to breaking. A sergeant is calling formation, time to move. You stand, joints, creaking muscles, protesting. Your body doesn't want to march. Your body wants to lie down and sleep for a week. But your body doesn't get a choice. You shoulder your pack, pick up your bow, take your place in the column forming along the road. The boy is there too, forced to his feet by Thomas's firm insistence. He looks terrible, like death warmed over, but he's upright. He's moving. That's all anyone can ask. The column starts marching, one foot in front of the other, the same rhythm you've walked 100 times before. The field you camped in falls behind, and within minutes, it's like you were never there. No trace except trampled grass and fire scars, and maybe a few forgotten stakes. By tomorrow, even those will be gone, scavenged by the next army to pass through, or weathered away by wind and rain. The night you survived will leave no physical record. It'll exist only in memory, in the exhausted bodies of 6 men who pressed together in darkness and refused to die. That's the real story of medieval winter survival. Not dramatic, not heroic, just stubborn, repetitive endurance. You march through the morning, and as the sun climbs higher, you actually start to feel warm. The movement generates heat. Your blood flows. Your muscles loosen. For a few hours in the middle of the day, winter retreats to something manageable, almost pleasant. But you know it's temporary. When the sun sets again, the cold will return. It always returns. And you'll have to fight it again, using the same techniques, relying on the same men, trusting the same small wisdoms about wool and straw and body heat. This is the rhythm of winter campaign. Cold night, brief warm day, cold night again. Over and over. A cycle that only breaks when spring arrives or death does. But you're still here, still walking, still alive. And tonight, when you lie down in some new field with the same 5 men, when you press your back against the boy's chest and feel Thomas settle at the tent's cold end, when you pull your wool cloak over your head and breathe into the small pocket of air you've created, you'll know something important. You survived before. You can survive again. The cold is patient. But so are you. And tomorrow morning, if you're lucky, if you're careful, if you remember everything the night teaches, you'll open your eyes and see another dawn. That's the victory. Not glorious, not celebrated, just opening your eyes, breathing, being alive to face one more day. That's all winter survival ever was. One more night, one more dawn, until spring finally comes, and you're still here to see it. The medieval world, with all its chill and smoke, fades now, like frost melting in morning sunlight. What remains is only calm. You are warm enough, safe enough, tired enough. Tonight you learned something those castle dwellers understood in their bones. That warmth is not a luxury, it is a triumph. That every layer, every flame, every body pressed close was a small act of defiance against the cold. They built fortresses of fabric in chambers of stone. They turned survival into ritual. And night after night, winter after winter, they endured. You carry that resilience with you now. As you lie in your warm bed with your soft blankets and your steady heat, you carry the memory of their ingenuity, their refusal to surrender. The story closes now. The hearth flickers one last time. The bed holds you as it held them, and the long night carries you gently into dreams before you drift away completely. If this journey into the past helped you find rest tonight, a like or a subscribe would mean the world. It tells me these stories matter, that history, even the cold and smoky parts, still has something to teach us, but only if it feels right, only if tonight's story earned it. Rest now as they once did, wrapped in quiet resilience. I'm Peter Miller, and I'm grateful you joined me tonight. Sweet dreams. You've just found a kind of peace that lets the day's worries fall away. Because that's what this channel is really about. Not just history, but connection. The recognition that people separated from us by centuries still felt cold the same way we do. Still feared the dark, still found comfort in the presence of others. They were us. We're them. Time passes, but certain truths remain. Winter is cold. Bodies generate warmth. Together we survive. If this journey helped you find the quiet you were looking for, I'm grateful. If it helped you drift towards sleep while learning something about how humans have always faced the darkness, then I've done what I set out to do. Sleep well, stay warm, And remember that every comfortable night is built on the accumulated wisdom of everyone who slept cold before us and lived to teach what worked. Thank you for joining me tonight. Until next time, I'm Peter Miller, and I'm so glad we could spend this time together. Good night.